Have you ever imagined living in Paris, strolling the streets, taking in the sights, and actually being able to afford it? Because I could not. For the majority of my life, it was a dream that I had, but one that was very much out of reach. Until I managed to find an apartment where I only had to pay 20 euros a month in rent. And to be honest, the way that my life had gone all the way up to moving back to Paris, this was the only way I could have ever afforded to start my life over in France. At the beginning of quarantine, I made a video about the space that I'm in, but I never really told the story about how I got it, what really comes with it, and what would happen if I lost it, which is something I've been thinking about a little bit more lately. I realized this is not a reasonable setup. I'm gonna tell you the story of how I ended up basically with free rent, because it is just, I mean, it really is a cornerstone to my entire story of getting myself set up in Paris, but I think that that's not necessarily a fair expectation for anybody that's hoping to live here one day. That's not to say you can't find cheap rent, or that a place like this wouldn't necessarily be incredibly overpriced. On two ends of that spectrum, just in this building, because what I'm in right now is basically a maid's chamber. So old French buildings usually have these row of apartments at the top. You'll see tiny little windows up there, and those are where the maids would stay, the hired help. So they're called chambres de bonne, or maids chambers. A lot of people end up staying there, a lot of students, a lot of like transients of all kind, whether they're on an internship or just a short contract. Whatever it is, it ends up being kind of a starter spot to land in Paris, or even sometimes an apartment away from home. Like if you own a house in Normandy, that's where you usually live, but you want to keep what's called a pied-à-terre, or a foot on the ground. Here in Paris, it enables you to, you know, still have a place to stay when you're here for business or for fun, for whatever. As this building is more of a modern building, instead of all of these being stacked on top of the main building, the maids' chambers are in basically a dormitory behind the main building. So it's kind of like a filing cabinet for humans, and each of these is about 140 square feet. The floor plan for most of them is the same, and on this floor, there are two that I know for sure that rent for very different prices, even though both of them have been renovated recently, and one of them was renovated with a toilet installed. That's right, there's no toilet in here. We're gonna talk about that. You're gonna be horrified, but we're gonna talk about that. Anyway, somebody renting this 140 square foot apartment, 13 square meters thereabout, can expect to spend anywhere from 700 bucks, as somebody living a few doors down does, to 1,100 bucks, as somebody living a few doors the other way does. Occasionally. There's a reason that the people in the 700 euro apartment tend to stay for about a year to a year and a half, and nobody's stayed in that other apartment for more than a few months, for a really long time. I also have a friend who has a very small place that might be smaller than this. We can go check it out if you're interested, but she pays about 400 bucks a month in rent. She lives in a really fun neighborhood. So, you know, you can definitely find something on the cheaper side here. It's just gonna be very small, not very many amenities. You know, it's gonna be tight. Anyway, now that you know what I basically should be paying, how do I even make this work? Just getting these shots set up is a good reminder of how it would be so nice to have space. This then is where I work. Pretty classic setup. I've got a second monitor down here. Thanks to Mystery Man and Yanni for coming through on this years ago. It's pretty crazy. Like, this is where I streamed during lockdown. It's where I do most of my editing, record my podcast, all that kind of stuff. And you can see that above me, I haven't even mentioned how the bed above me, the desk that I'm sitting at, and the bookshelves, the closet, not closet space, drawers, right? Stairs are made into drawers. So much of the efficiency of this space is made by that structure, right? The structure with the mezzanine bed and everything underneath it enables me to have kind of this two-story setup, because the ceilings are so tall that I'm able to get away with a little bit extra floor space that before I didn't have. Like when I first lived here, there was a bed in the corner. It would always just fall apart on me. I slept on a mat on the floor and I made do. And thankfully, my landlady was generous enough not only to let me live here, but eventually she put this together for me, which was very, very kind. And is what made lockdown in particular livable, but then is also what made this space very efficient for getting some work done, living a little bit, and having not such a bad time. It is a little bit cramped here. I mean, the chair barely fits between this leg, which you might not be able to see anymore. It's not exactly the most free-flowing, and you know, the space is just a little bit cramped. But enough about where I work. How about where I feed myself and also carry out most of my acts of personal hygiene? Welcome to my kitchen. Also where I brush my teeth. Also where I air my gym clothes out. It's not really a kitchen, but if I put my hot plate on top of my washing machine here, it is not fun to cook in here. When I'm done cooking my delicious meals, in this case, air, this is where I eat. Right next to where I work. You're sitting where I work. I'm sitting where I eat. And you might be asking yourself, Jay, how did you get a free apartment in Paris? And well, that's a long story. And if I told you, I'd have to kill you. But as I can't find you yet, I might as well tell you the story. And hey, we can get the game afoot. You look so unimpressed. A decade ago, holy crap, I was volunteering on a hospital ship in Western and Central Africa, and I made friends with a variety of doctors. One of those doctors had a mother, and that mother happened to have an apartment here in Paris. Fast forward 11 years, and I'm still here. It's literally the only way that I could afford to start my life back over when I got to Paris. You've seen where I sleep, where I work, where I eat, where I watch YouTube, and where I poop. This is all the way at the end of the hall. The story of how I actually ended up here is one of those interesting ones in the fact it doesn't sound real, really. It was 2012 and I just left West Africa to teach English here / edit and write for the global office of the same organization I was volunteering with in West Africa. And after like a month or two of searching for a place to live, I couldn't find one. And it was worse than that because I was staying on the floor of an acquaintance's uncle. And that apartment was basically this apartment times maybe 1.5, maybe 2. There was not a lot of space and there was nowhere for me to sleep. So I literally slept on a hardwood floor until I found my apartment. And the mat that I refer to sleeping on here was one that somebody was kind enough to give me when I was staying in this guy's place. I mean, he'd randomly kick me out, you know, because his girlfriend was coming over. There were multiple times where I got texts that were literally like, just don't come home tonight. So I found myself a little bit housing unstable, shall we say, and spending a few nights crashing on, thankfully, friends' couches when I didn't have a place to sleep. Now the thing is, I hadn't wanted to admit how hard it was to find an apartment because I don't know how many people really thought it was a good idea that I was moving to Paris. I'm not sure that anyone was really all that supportive of it. And the last thing I wanted to do was admit that it was proving really hard. It wasn't that I couldn't even find apartments, it was that both the organization I was volunteering for and the French government, who I was teaching English for, just weren't paying me. That was a mystery. And about 2 months into this, I finally had to write a blog post and just admit that, yeah, like I can't do this. Like I've been looking, I don't know what to do. I don't have any resources. I'm stuck. I posted that and I went to the Louvre because of all the things that I did have, I had my Metro card because I had to get to work to teach English, and I had my teacher's pass, which got me into monuments and national museums, blessedly for free. So even though I could barely afford 50 cents to make my own sandwich, I could afford to hop on the Metro and go down to the Louvre and just wander through for a bit and relax. Not that that's the most relaxing place to relax, you get the idea. So I head back to this tiny little apartment, open up my oversized ancient computer, turn it on, and there's a message waiting for me. And it basically says, hey, I read your blog post and I was concerned. My mother-in-law saw the concern on my face when she walked into the room and out of nowhere offered to let you use her maid's chamber. This was mind-blowing because she'd never let anybody use this space in like 25 years, family or friend, let alone total stranger off the internet. And here we are, all of a sudden she's offering to let me use it. We met, we had dinner. That was one of the biggest things. They offered to buy me dinner, which was great because when I say 50 cents for a sandwich, I'm not kidding. I would buy a baguette, make it last for like 2 or 3 days, and then just buy the cheapest lunch meat and whatever else I could get into it. And like the math worked out to about 50 cents a sandwich, maybe about €1. It wasn't great. So I'm hungry, she's kind to me. They're like, well, we need to redo the electricity because this place is so old. I'll show you the electrical box. There's one of the electrical boxes is still here, the main circuit. This is still functioning. If I hit that button, all the electricity gets cut off, which is I'll just do it. But now there goes my internet. Once we have everything up to date, then we'll let you move in. And it was such a huge relief. And I was able to move in and the deal was, hey, you pay for internet, like 20 bucks a month, just wire that directly to me every month. And then otherwise you're good. You can just come in, you can stay. Nothing else to worry about. And that was life-changing for obvious reasons, but like as somebody who just spent years volunteering in West Africa, who moved to Paris basically just out of pure desire with no backup. Like I had no parachute, there was no help, no one was gonna come to my rescue. That was a huge, huge deal to find a place just to stay, to live, and it would end up paving the way for the future too, because when I moved back here in 2017, I was on the verge of going bankrupt. Like everything I'd done in the States, all the projects that I'd put myself into, every investment that I'd made of both my time and money and energy, everything was falling apart. But that's a story for a book that I've literally already written. So we'll skip that for now. And so this place very literally saved my life, because when I was stuck in the Northwest, when I couldn't figure out how to get out of the rut that I was in, and I couldn't figure out how to get back here, not having a place to land when I got here would have been the death knell for any possibility of coming back to Paris. It would have been the end. Like, I would not have been able to move back here to start my life over. There would be no Jay Does Paris videos to enjoy. So thanks to Brigitte, my landlady, for making this possible, and for definitely being the #1 patron I have ever had, and clearly the patron producer of today's episode. Without you, it would not be possible. So as much as I might struggle living in such tight quarters right now, especially with little Cooper right here, he's like, "Why did you wake me from my slumber? I was having such a good dream." This place has had a huge impact on my life, and it's enabled so many things. Not only just making YouTube videos and exploring Paris, but if you think about it, like the rent that I've saved is the reason that I've been able to go and explore and try so many places in Paris. Whether that was like experiences that I had to pay for, or food, drinks, coffee, all those places that I've gone, enjoyed, and made my own, you know, the recommendations that I make. It's because I was able to put my rent basically towards food, which is good because, again, without a kitchen, like, I really miss having a real kitchen. A lot of people are always like, "Oh, you can still cook in that tiny space." I mean, I've always dreamed of having my own Parisian apartment. It's something I put on my goal board back in the day, something that I've talked about on and off for a really long time. And it's something that I've put off because I wanted to take the money that I've saved by living here and reinvest it into my business, into making better videos, into figuring out what it is exactly that I'm even doing here in Paris. But there comes a time where you kind of just need some more space. I mean, Cooper is this extra sleepy just because we're in here. He knows that when we're in this room, there's not a lot of space to play, so he just kind of goes to sleep, which is kind of sad. Like, if we go to bigger spaces, people's apartments, we get to the park, wherever, he's so much more energetic. And not to make it depressing, this space is very safe and I'm very glad to have it. And Cooper's very glad to have it too. But, you know, it'd be nice to spread our wings just a little bit. That's something that I'm gonna be revisiting here, like dreaming about. But even maybe just renting something in a neighborhood that I enjoy more, with a little bit more space for Cooper and I think would do us a lot of good for both our mental and our emotional health. And when I say our, I mean mine. He's probably fine no matter what. I've definitely had the fear of like, what happens if I lose this place? My landlady was kind enough to say that this was mine until she died. She's been so generous. And I came from this place of scarcity. When I moved here, I was obviously really struggling, and just so much of my life has been defined by struggle. Losing this place has been something that has always been a little bit of a fear, but I think I'd like to move that from being a fear into gaining something else. Like, I'd like to start thinking about, what does it look like to have my own place? Because the reality is, I've never had my own space. I grew up in a home that I always felt like an unwelcome guest in. Like, I never really felt like I belonged, or that it was my space. I always felt like I was stepping on someone else's toes. And now I'm in a place that I have made it into my own in so many ways, but I know that I can't stay here forever. And I also know that I would like to have some more space at some point. Cooper doesn't really know what he wants. He just wants to hang out. So he's pretty chill no matter what. If you're interested in seeing some of my friends' apartments, kind of getting an idea of what people pay for what here in town, that'd be something I'd be interested in looking into. I also want to start learning about everything it's going to take to rent an apartment, especially in 2024. So if you're interested in seeing some other people's apartments, maybe learning about what it takes to rent or even buy here in Paris, let me know down in the comments, because that's something that I'm really interested in learning more about. Not only because I think it's, you know, just generally interesting, but also because I kind of need to know, and I would like to get on top of that sooner than later. As for Cooper recommendations, well, he says if you enjoyed this, you might enjoy watching the longer video that I made about this entire apartment during quarantine before he was even born. He's fascinated by it because he's like, what do you mean before I was born? This place has always been Cooper's playground. Go watch that video now and you can see a little bit more detail about what went into this place. Before I added a few things, which I guess we can talk about some other time, but for now, whoa, somebody probably needs to go for a walk. Oh.